25 things you should never do in front of King Charles III. Hello and welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we'll be discussing the 25 things you should never do in front of King Charles. As the longest-serving heir to the British throne and following his ascension to the throne as the head of the British monarchy, it's important that certain precautions are taken in relation to the king. From avoiding inappropriate language to following established customs, we'll be covering all the do's and don'ts of interacting with royalty. It's essential to understand the proper behavior and avoid any faux pas. From the way you dress to how you address him, every detail matters. So sit back, take notes, and learn the do's and don'ts of royal protocol. You surely don't want to be in the bad books of the king. Let's get right into it. Number 1. Never speak disrespectfully about the monarchy or the royal family. Let's begin this list with the most obvious don't when in front of the monarchy. You don't speak ill of the monarchy. And while people do it from the anonymity of social media, it would be extremely psychotic to do so in front of the king. Speaking disrespectfully about the monarchy or the royal family can be seen as an act of disrespect towards the king himself, as well as the institution he represents. It's important to be mindful of the position that he holds and the role that the monarchy plays in British society. You cannot afford to be seen disrespecting the reigning monarch. Number 2. Criticize his policies or actions. Now, not only is it fundamentally wrong for you to speak ill of the monarchy into the ears of the king, another thing you don't want to be caught doing is criticizing the policies that are rolled out by the monarchy in front of the king. Criticizing the king's policies or actions can also be seen as an act of disrespect, as he's worked hard to serve his country and uphold his duties as a member of the royal family. It would have been fairly wrong when he was just the heir to the throne, but right now, an insult to the policies of King Charles is very much an insult to the throne and the British monarchy. It's important to remember that the king has a unique perspective on the issues he faces and deserves respect for his efforts. Number 3. Show up underdressed or inappropriately dressed for the occasion. The saying goes, "How you dress is how you would be addressed." When dealing with the King of England, this is so very true. The way the king addresses you is a direct representation of how you've presented yourself to him. So whatever you do, make sure you dress accordingly. Showing up inappropriately dressed for the occasion can be seen as a lack of respect for the event, and by extension, for the king himself. Dressing appropriately shows that you're taking the occasion seriously and acknowledging its significance. The inappropriate dress can be interpreted as a blatant disregard for the king and for the monarchy. Number 4. Chewing gum or eating with your mouth open. When Queen Elizabeth was still very much alive and serving as the head of the British monarchy, one of the things you could not do in front of the Queen was take a bite at the dinner table before her. The absolute deal breaker for King Charles is chewing with your mouth open. To the rest of the world, chewing with your mouth open can be considered as bad etiquette, but when it's done in front of the king, it's considered an act of poor manners and a lack of respect towards the king. He considers it distracting and can make a negative impression on him and other people around him. Number 5. Display any form of aggression or violence. This one may be a little bit obvious, but still important to mention. Displaying the slightest form of aggression or violence in front of the monarch is a big no-no, specifically in front of King Charles. The king is never alone. He moves with a security detail almost like that of the President of the United States, and these individuals are trained to act on and silence any appearance of a threat. Any form of aggression and violence would be interpreted as a threat to the crown and the country. Number 6. Use foul language or make inappropriate jokes. This should go without saying, but making use of foul language as well as inappropriate jokes to either the king or in a gathering where the king is present is seen as a disrespectful act. Like the bulk of the don'ts you'd find on this list that we've created, this type of action is seen as extremely rude. He represents the British royal family, and his conduct should reflect the values of the institution, so it's important to maintain a level of decorum. Number 7. Take photos without permission. When you see a celebrity that you like or don't like, one of the first things many people do is take pictures. But it might not be a good idea when you're in close contact with any of the members of the British monarchy, and more importantly, the king. Taking photos of or with the king without permission from him can be interpreted as intrusive and disrespectful. Despite being the king, Charles is entitled to a bit of privacy. More so, given that he's a public figure, photos can be taken out of context or used inappropriately. This is why it might be considered inappropriate if you do not ask for permission before taking photos or recording videos of the king. Number 8. Interrupt him or speak out of turn. What's worse than coming in late and disrupting the king while he's making a speech? Interrupting him while he's speaking. It's just rational not to unreasonably speak out of turn before the king invited you to speak. It's important to listen attentively and wait for your turn to speak, to show respect to the king and to the other people involved in the conversation. Number 9. Drink too much alcohol or become visibly intoxicated. It wouldn't be ridiculous to assume that there would only be the best quality alcohol served at events with the king in attendance. It would be ridiculous to overindulge and make a fool of yourself. Every action or inaction of the king is scrutinized by the public, so it almost goes without saying that those in attendance at events where he's also present should maintain a certain level of decorum. Number 10. Smoke or vape in his presence. If you're gonna smoke, do well to smoke in a place where non-smokers are not affected. Not only is it the polite thing to do, but King Charles is reportedly a non-smoker. This one's more common sense than anything, but if you do smoke or vape, be sure to take it outside. Number 11. Use your phone or other electronic devices without permission. Pulling out your phone and checking for the latest simplified explanation video in any social setting is just bad etiquette. But doing it in front of the king is just a recipe for disaster. Not only would it be distracting for anyone around you, but it would detract from the main reason the king is present. Whether it be a networking event or one of his many charity events, attendees are expected to show a basic level of respect when in his presence. Not only that, thanks to social media, private conversations are rarely kept private anymore, and any word spoken by the king could be taken out of context and cause unnecessary controversy. Number 12. Show up late to a scheduled meeting or event. If you're late for a meeting that has the king in attendance, you might as well not bother showing up. Showing up late to a scheduled meeting or event with King Charles is interpreted as showing no regard for the king's time or the importance of the occasion. Being punctual shows that you take the meeting or event seriously, and it's an important way to show respect to the king and his position. Number 13. Wear a hat indoors. To be fair, this isn't a personal rule of King Charles, but more of a rule followed by the aristocracy in general. Wearing a hat indoors when in the presence of King Charles, the head of the British monarchy, comes off as disrespectful to the crown. It's a breach of traditional etiquette and can be seen as a sign of disrespect towards the king and the occasion. Number 14. Touch him or try to get too close to him without permission. We mentioned earlier how intense the king's security detail is. It goes without saying that trying to get close to him or even touch him without consent is likely going to get you tackled. It's important to respect anyone's personal space, but disrespecting the king's personal space is sure to get you thrown out, or worse, hurt. Number 15. Argue with him or try to engage in a heated debate. While it would be ridiculous to assume you would agree with every single word that comes out of King Charles' mouth, it's safe to say that disagreeing with him in public is probably not the best move. Arguing with King Charles or attempting to engage in a heated debate can be seen as disrespectful and inappropriate, irrespective of how well-intended your disagreement is. The king's opinion and decisions are highly valued, and it's important to approach discussions with respect and an open mind. When engaging in this type of discussion that might be contrary to the opinion of King Charles, It's expected that it's done without sounding confrontational. Number 16. Use excessive or inappropriate gestures while speaking. How do you greet the monarchy? Females are expected to curtsy. A bow is mandatory for males. No celebrity is above this rule. Not even immediate family members in line for the throne can skirt this rule. There are a lot of rules when it comes to the monarchy that many people are not expected to know, but curtsying and bowing in the monarch's presence is pretty universally understood. Number 17. Make loud or disruptive noises. Being in the presence of the monarch is often considered a privilege in itself. So when you do find yourself at a royal event or function, it's important to maintain a level of professionalism and decorum. You don't want to be the person who appears disruptive, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Don't go out of line by making ridiculous noises or embarrassing yourself by not understanding the protocol at the event. Speaking of protocol, Number 18. Ignore protocol or break established customs. It might come as a shock to many, but not some, but the monarchy is one of the oldest institutions in Britain. It's an institution that has stayed in plain sight and tried hard to actively incorporate itself into modern society. Since the monarchy's been around for so long, there are a few customs and traditions that may seem a little bit outdated by today's standards. If you're tempted to break those protocols and old customs, you might want to think twice. It would show complete disregard for the throne and crown, especially if you try to do this in front of the king. Number 19. Do not say, "Pardon." Members of the royal family are much more difficult to communicate with than even a modern-day politician. For example, if you misspeak around a politician, it's still commonplace and acceptable to say the word "pardon" to excuse yourself in front of the president. But to a royal, don't even think about it. The world of the royals is so difficult to comprehend for us civilians. The word "pardon" is apparently interpreted as a swear to the monarchy. If you find yourself in a conversation with the king and you're looking to excuse yourself, a simple "sorry" will cut it. Number 20. Use slang or overly casual language. Communication is of utmost importance when it comes to the monarchy. King Charles in particular puts great emphasis on the written and spoken word. But not only that, the monarchy has a strict policy on how to speak or address members of the royal family. When addressing the king, one should say "Your Majesty" or "Sire." But to simply call him king is as bad as calling him by his given name, Charles. In fact, it's said that the king would rather be addressed as Charles than king. Number 21. Show disrespect to his staff or security personnel. While in the king's presence, and even in his absence, treat his team with all the grace and royalty that you would treat the king with. When he's absent, they're his representatives after all. Number 22. Display inappropriate body language or facial expressions. How well do you mask your emotions when it comes to body language and facial expressions? As much as we fail to admit, most of us are terrible at it. Think about the way you gauge the way someone else is feeling when you're in a conversation or situation with them. It's their body language and facial expressions. Anyone who's going to be in the presence of King Charles better get their emotions in check beforehand, because inappropriate body language or expressions in his presence isn't really recommended. Not a fan of his speech? Chicken is dry? Hate his shoes? He doesn't want to know. Number 23. Show up unprepared or uninformed about the topic at hand. This is just a life lesson. However, showing up to a meeting or event with King Charles in attendance unprepared is definitely not recommended. If you're presenting to the king or sharing your knowledge or information with him, you can't really afford not to know what you're talking about. His time is precious, and if you're unprepared, it's likely you won't get another chance. Number 24. Use offensive or derogatory language. The actions of members of the British royal family are scrutinized heavily by media outlets and individuals around the world. They always try to put their best foot forward when it comes to public events and their manners. So it almost goes without saying, if you're at an event or meeting with the monarch, don't use offensive words or derogatory language because it would in turn reflect badly on them. If you find yourself in the company of the king, do your best to avoid derogatory terms and anything that would be considered offensive, just to be safe. Number 25. Make demands or act entitled. While there are a ton of stories of King Charles acting entitled, it's not something that would be recommended for someone else to do in his presence. It wouldn't be surprising that the king or the king's staff would immediately shut down any individual making demands or acting entitled in the presence of the king. King Charles is known to speak his mind, so anyone choosing to disregard this rule would likely get it right back. The list of do's and don'ts of the royal family of Great Britain goes on and on. As much as this applies to the king, it also applies to most, if not all, of the other royals. We hope this video helps you on the off chance you do get the chance to meet King Charles. If anything, we hope it was entertaining at the very least. If you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments section, especially if there's a rule you absolutely do or do not agree with. We'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching. Check out some of our other videos in the description below.